So now we are going to move on to these WWE releases that are breaking tonight, and these were first reported by a combination of PW Insider and Fightful. And this is a combination of people being cut and contracts not being renewed, as WWE sometimes parses this. What is the difference? If you are being released, then you're subject to a 90-day no-compete clause. If they tell you, your contract is up on February 28th, we are not renewing it, you're a free agent as of March 1st. You can go anywhere you want. You don't have that 90-day no-compete. And so that is the difference, essentially. In both cases, they are telling you that, you are no longer working here. It's just a matter of it's immediate or is going to be once your contract date is expired. But, those names include Cedric Alexander, who disclosed this himself earlier tonight, just thanking everyone for the last 8.5 years and giving a brief message online indicating that he was released. Sonya Deville, who it sounds like her contract is coming due and is not going to be renewed. And then the combination of AOP and Paul Ellering of The Final Testament, and all three have been absent on television for a long period of time. It has largely just been reduced to the act of Karrion Kross and Scarlett that have been represented on Raw. And it was odd because we did have that scene with the Wyatt Six, if you remember, where it felt like they were writing off Paul Ellering, where he was kind of like killed off, but then he made the big return afterwards. So at that point, I was curious if Paul Ellering was going to be coming back. He did, but very briefly. And then the last name that, again, as of 20 past 11 p.m., was Blair Davenport, who was another name attached to these as well. So we will continue to monitor. I don't know if there will be any more names to this list, but Any thoughts just on any of these performers? I would imagine none of them would have been surprising names.
No, not for me personally. I mean, several of them have not been either seen on TV in recent weeks or certainly ever put into notable positions.
Alexander was kind of like Ricochet, where they did the big attack by Ethan Page on NXT and slammed the toolbox on his hand, and it was almost like he had an angle to come back to, but is not going to. So he was basically written off. He had kind of been serving as Javon Evans' on-screen mentor. That was the latest with him. Sonya Deville is just going to be one of those. Like now, PFC is going to be 2 people instead of 3, and it'll just be no acknowledgement.
If it'll be PFC at all, just on Alexander, he is one that in September, Fightful did announce that he re-signed with. Actually, he re-signed in the spring of last year. They reported in September. So,
again, like this is where this is so like weighted towards the company is that you can be under a contract, you can be cut at any point. Like they can sign you to a 5-year deal and they can fire you after 6 months if they so choose. Like you are not bound by the term of that contract, whatever the length is.
So he's got a 90-day non-compete. His is a release as
he even included in his message, see you in 90. So yeah, we know there'll be 3 months that he's up, and I'm sure everybody is going to be looking at him like there's an obvious role for him if the Hurt Syndicate wants to expand to 4. I mean, there's that obvious option for him.
Yep. So as well, Blair Davenport, AOP, and Paul Ellering are all expected to be releases. The only person who is having a contract lapse is Sonya Deville, which means she has no non-compete and she could technically appear for any promotion at the end of this term.
Yeah, whenever that deal is up, she would not have that 90-day no-compete.
February?
Who's this?
Sonya Deville.
Well, it's when her contract's up. I don't know what the date is of when her contract's up.
I'm just going by Neil's report here.
Okay. Anyway, so those are the names we will see. Like Blair Davenport was one. Like she was brought up last year in the draft, and I mean, outside of like some brief stuff with Naomi, did nothing on SmackDown. I mean, you would have no. The odd part is that we talked about this expansion on SmackDown to 3 hours and how this was going to be so beneficial, and you need more bodies. And here it's like you're entering this big phase. You're bringing in all this more revenue, and you have more TV time than ever, and they're getting rid of people. Like it does tell you like their mindset here that this is obvious, and this extends to Duke Hudson. I think certain performers that they just feel like they're they are not going to invest in that time and do not see that need to continue to try and push these people and this frees them up for people like NXT call-ups or others that can fill those spots. That must be the thinking.
They're hiring way more people than they're cutting. There are a lot of people that are waiting between, people at the PC, people in NXT, people in NIL, people in WWE ID. So none of this really surprises me all that much. We just maybe have to assess, like, did they give any of these talents a fair opportunity, to get over? In the case of Davenport, I feel like we barely saw her on TV, so I don't know if we can actually make that assessment. We also don't know maybe whether or not she was impressing people in the back, or it could just be a case of them like creatively feeling like they had nothing for this particular person. It's wrestling is totally.
She did get the call up. To me, it's like if you are doing the call up, like that was one of the things Paul Levesque said, is that we don't want to call people up without having a plan in place. And yeah, like she was on TV for a little bit. But it's not like she came up and there was some big angle that just, like, at least with AOP and Paul Ellering, you can say they were part of an angle that, it didn't, the final judgment, it did not click. It did not get a final testament. Whatever. They tried. Judgment Day. They had an idea for them. It didn't click, and there it is. Like a Blair Davenport, you really didn't get out of the gates on the main roster, I would say. It just felt like she was brought up and there was not a whole lot of, any kind of planning for her in any significant way. Yeah.
Still, you have to say, like, okay, in the limited time that she did receive, did she make the most of it? I don't even know if it's fair to say yes or no, but at the very least, we can't say she was not involved in any sort of memorable, notable thing, during her time on the main roster. Same with AOP. Sonya Deville is an interesting one.
She was out with that knee injury for like a year.
And
then unfortunate setback, had the terrible legal problems with the break-in back in 2020 that she had to come back from,
which you can argue derailed the height of her WWE career.
That was her peak with Mandy Rose, was that program. I really do.
Yeah, so it's really sad to maybe look back on that incident as a potential what if her life did not get ruined by this awful incident, and she continued on that trajectory that she unfortunately has never really kind of come back to.
She's kind of doing the pseudo GM role with Adam Pearce, like a really good talker. Like I certainly see Sonya Deville as someone I would have a lot of interest in, because this Pure Fusion collective, like, she was not really that much of a focus of the group. Like, she was sort of like the mouthpiece for them, but it was in much more of a subdued role. I could certainly see, like, even it is interesting that you see like the options here, like TNA's level of interest in some of these performers and what that is going to be, and if that is a potential landing spot for people that WWE does not have a spot for as well.
Yeah, I could see both AEW and TNA, having some interest in maybe looking at her. Like, in ring, I feel like she's of a certain standard, like certainly not blow away. I'm curious to see if she makes any of these people really, like, certainly B. Priestley. You could expect she's kind of proven herself. She's made a name in stardom in the indies, and you could expect her to like easily transition back into that world. Somebody like Sonya Deville has never entered that world. So I'm very curious to see what if she attempts. Like, a blood sport is sort of like a perfect place for her.
Hair up and square up.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Marina, there you have it. You're all set.
So I'm curious if any of these talents are able to reinvent and refine themselves without the sort of creative of the WWE perhaps limiting their abilities. I hope she's inspired enough to keep going.
Do you think that Brandon Vink is glad he got his video out this week about the line, you weren't part of the mass firings, they just hated you? I mean, he got a couple days like heads up to at least get his video out.
Agreed. Well, yeah, he certainly caught a bit more special attention, being the only release as of the beginning of this week. But I mean, the market for free agents continues to just build up. So, like, is a Brandon Vink as interesting of a prospect anymore now that I guess so many more talents are out there?
Yeah, it's you always want to see people have land on their feet, and with AEW, I mean, that's the obvious one everyone looks to, but
they have too many people.
Well, that's what we say about everybody. And I would argue as well, like there is that growing thought, and it's not a knock against any of these performers, but it's also the idea that like these are kind of like your lower end main roster players. And does AEW want to be in the market where, like, listen, an Elias might do great, but like there also is a stigma attached when you are signing up like all of those levels of people that they look at as people that, you know, did not make it in WWE. And yes, you can look at them as rehab projects, but when there's such a plethora of them, I think that becomes a trap as well if you are AEW and getting caught in that.
I think if you're AEW, you wait to see what these talents do, if they can prove themselves, like in whether it be the independents or like, you know, maybe it's a TNA for a year, maybe it's, you know, international, you know, like let them do stuff outside. And if they gain enough buzz, then maybe you consider looking at them. Again, like I actually am sometimes more excited at like some of the lower card guys coming into AEW and reinventing themselves than I am just like somebody who's already a big star coming in and essentially playing the same character. So I hope for some of these guys you get that transformation. If you like this video, consider joining our Patreon, the Post Wrestling Cafe. Multiple bonus podcasts every week, ad-free shows, and access to our full archive. Otherwise, a like and subscribe is much appreciated. Thank you for watching.